All right, so our next tip for remote work is to optimize communications. So we talked in that previously about having open communication dialogue, but let's dive in a little more about that optimizing. Another word I like to use for that is setting the ground rules, making sure everyone understands what to use when. So the first tip we have here is to decide how you will monitor the various channels for communication. And that is definitely something in the modern workforce that we do have more than one channel. When you think back to, the beginnings of certain types of work, you had to speak to that person. Like face to face was the only channel of communication. So now we have face to face, we've got the phone, we've got text, we've got Slack, we've got notifications, we've got, comments, we've got inline comments, we've got, track changes. So when you think about this variety of channels, it can be exhausting. And not only that, it can, and depending on what your work is, some of those are going to be more time sensitive and critical than others. So as you think about how you would monitor that. And so with that, Ken, what would you say would be kind of a critical, or how would you go to monitoring, like, or how would you even coach someone to that? Like when you say, okay, monitor various channels.
Just do it.
Good luck, right?
You,
Focus,
you you'll figure it out, kid.
focus more, focus, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, you need to have there needs to be some type of direction, some type of expectations. Like we talked earlier about, like, we were in a meeting where it was like everybody just used their favorite type of communication. And I can remember, this was several years ago, but I remember one team member was like, I like Skype. Skype's great. We should all be using Skype. And nobody else was using Skype. It was this person's favorite mode of communication. And he was just like, well, yeah, I'll be sending stuff to you in Skype. Well, it's like, I wasn't monitoring Skype because I didn't use Skype, on a regular basis. There would be every once in a while we'd do a training where I had a Skype account and I'd use it. So it's like he found that Skype account and he would just send me stuff on the Skype account.
So how
And
many
it was
unread messages? So you log in and you see all these
I probably
messages.
look right now. They're probably still there. There's probably like 50 unread Skype messages or something. I'm like, oh man, I should have. I didn't. I felt bad. Or is he still on the side of the road with a flat tire? I wonder if anybody ever helped him.
So I guess
Um,
a better point would have been like decide which channels of communication you're going to use first, and then how you're going to monitor them. Maybe there should be an agreement.
yeah, and in the modern workplace, I mean, it's pretty standard. Like you're going to have email. You're probably going to have some type of like Teams or Slack. Like you mentioned, you have your text messages. You got your voicemails.
You could have an app where you're tracking sales leads and having to document within the app that's going to send you messages and notifications.
That's just one of my superpowers, I guess, is I'm good at like watching all the communication channels. But when we help people manage virtual conferences, it takes it up a notch, like during the conference, because we're in the middle of actively facilitating and being on camera, to like monitoring like the hotline. People are texting us, people are calling us. There's usually some type of app that the virtual conference is operating in. You got to keep an eye on that. So, that usually really challenges me to keep up on everything, because everything's so active and time sensitive. And I have to be really intentional and usually kind of put things within my purview. So, like, every once in a while, I can kind of even do like that kind of thing where I'm looking for those little red notifications, and it's like if the application doesn't give me a red notification, those are the we've used some things in the past that you had to actually click on it to look to see if there were any new messages, because there wasn't a notification on it. So we were joking about just do it, but it's like you do have to figure out, like, how's this going to work best for me? Because I could describe what I do, and you might be like, yeah, that doesn't. I know a lot. You and I will talk about different things, and You'll talk about bringing up different things on monitors, and I'm like, yeah, I don't like to do that. I don't want to do that. Like, so I have to figure out what works best for me.
Well, and what you just described is a very active monitoring of a situation where we're supporting, 300 participants. It's a live virtual event. So that one you've got a lot of things coming in. But then kind of I was thinking on the spectrum at the other end, if you are trying to do some deep work, if you're having to read something or you're writing or you're, creating or something where you don't, it's kind of a solo task. If that's part of your work, then all of those things coming in to pull your attention away from that would have the opposite effect because you're like those are not the most important thing there. And so I think that's part of that. How will you monitor? Actually, I'm going to jump to that third point of like blocking times and letting the rest of the team know if you're like, no, I have to get this report written, or I'm, creating this end of session report or whatever you're doing. But again, it goes back to what we were saying, that open communication and dialogue. You have to communicate with other people on your team. You can't just disappear. And I think that's part of where people will be like, oh, well, we never know where the remote work people are. So if you think of like in person, you can physically see the person. That does not mean that they are highly productive. That just means you can see their body. But then you
Or
on
that they're available. Like you talked about the pop-ins earlier, right? Like it's like just because my office door's open doesn't necessarily mean I want everybody walking in. It's just when I close it, it gets too hot and stuffy in there. So I need to leave the door open to let the air flow.
right, it's open communication. Like, are you available? And you can you're taking in all of these, in your responses versus, okay, I need to have the little boundary, have a little buffer around me so I can get some work done.
Yeah, another one too is, and this is more of a modern workplace one as well, is using proactive messaging to reduce emails requesting your attention, like status updates or FYIs. And to me, that screams things like Teams or Slack, right? It's like those quick, like work type messages where I don't necessarily need to send you an email about it, but I want to let you know where things are at, or have a collaborative document somewhere that we're working on. And so you'll need to be like, hey, what's the latest version? It's like we already know this is where it is. This is where that information is. And I feel like, man, I mean, things have really got, I used to like email used to really be a beatdown. And I think with the use of Teams, at least for us, it's kind of been a game changer of organizing information and communication. As a remote worker myself, like I feel like it helps us stay in contact more too. If you think of something like quick that you forgot to say, or maybe it's something funny that you want to say, you can really kind of get to know people's personalities that way too, since we're not like just always in the same space together.
Yeah. I love that. I was thinking of when we transitioned to Teams, even the thumbs up emoji. And I know that differs by your what is it, your generation? Like some people think it's passive aggressive or, all the different interpretations of the emojis. For us, we do add the little emoji with that, but it is knowing what you can do. So are there, and I know as we've collaborated on things, it's thinking about like the downstream effects, like how can I set this up and then to communicate it to you of what's next versus, and how do we get feedback? But, in the beginning, before the technologies had branched into so much of the modern messaging platforms, it was that everything was back and forth through email. And so now it seems like there's a different place for the use of email versus things that are more like an ongoing conversation, and especially our internal stuff. Those tend to happen in, chat or group chat versus the working collaboratively on a document. So it seems like the teams that are successful know what tools they're using and they know the ground rules or the expectations around them, And going back to that dialogue, if something's not working for you, speak up. Don't just, suffer in silence and be like, why don't they know, why can't they read my mind and adjust their behaviors accordingly?
Yeah, like even the thumbs up thing you mentioned, it's like for us it's kind of an unwritten like I see that. I got it.
Mhm.
So it's confirmation. And like there have been a few times where the notifications haven't worked properly where we'll come into a meeting and you might say, "Hey, like did you get a chance to look at that I sent?" And it's like, what are you talking about?" And then it's like, "Oh no." It's like, "Oh yeah, you didn't do a thumbs up on that or anything." It's like, "Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't get the notification for some reason. I didn't know you'd put anything in there."
Well, twice I
So
didn't I didn't hit send twice, so that did.
yeah, sometimes it's like, oh wait, yeah, it's still sitting here. That's why you
Like,
didn't
oh,
read it.
thought that was odd you didn't respond, but oh, there was nothing to respond to.
Yeah, and so I guess that kind of leads to another bullet point about balancing e-communication with more human communications and connections. It's like everything shouldn't be in Teams or Slack. We talked about this in the first block about having intentional times to connect and talk to and meet with different groups and individuals. I think yeah, you need a balance of both. I know some of us are introverted, some of us are extroverted, and have preferences for one side or the other typically, but it's I think too much of one thing is not good.
Yeah, and there's something about seeing someone or hearing their voice in addition to just knowing their email address. And so I think that's part of what this is. And I've heard, or probably heard people tell me stories of people starting remote work jobs that they, they don't see, because it's all email based. And so they never see another person or they never hear, and they don't even use the phone. It's all when I say text space, so it's all, written communication. And there is something about having that human connection because there are certain groups that I've facilitated that I've known people through email. And then it's such a delight that once you've had that and you hear that other person's voice and you see them, so then I don't know about you, but for me, then when I see their words written in text, like if they're sending me an email or something, I hear their voice because, especially like I don't know, all your messages that are in Teams are read in your voice. I don't read them in my voice. But I think that's part of the that human connection it's really powerful. We're kind of wired for that.
Yeah, and you had made the comment about making your voice heard, and I do feel like that's one of those tips that can be easier said than done, kind of depending on your personality and personality of others. Like it's like, okay, I'm going to make sure my voice is heard, but then there might be somebody on your team that's always like just kind of shouting people down or so yeah, I do recognize on that one, like it's important. You need to, don't give up. You need to figure out a way to make your voice heard. But I also recognize that's easier said than done for people, depending on their own personality and the personality of other people on their team.
And I know this tip was focused more toward workers, but and I know we're going to get into like managers and things like that. But the flip of that is that if you're leading the group, you can also provide space to make that easier for employees.
All right. We ready to go on to tip number 3?
I think so.